The Earth fleet sent a message across the void. "Hold on. We're here." The words echoed through the battered command center of the alien colony, a beacon of hope where only despair had existed. The colony leader, Valen, a member of the fragile Tarvaxi species, barely believed it. For cycles, their distress signals had been ignored by the powerful empires of the galaxy. Now, the humans, a species barely known, had arrived in their strongest warships, standing between the Tarvaxi and certain destruction. Above the planet, the Salcor fleet adjusted its formation. Their monstrous ships, covered in thick armor and pulsing with red energy, turned their weapons toward the human vessels. They saw the humans as weak, a minor species with no significant presence in the galactic order. This would be an easy battle, a short delay before they wiped the colony from existence. The Salcor commander, Varkle, sneered as he analyzed the incoming ships. There were fewer of them than his own fleet. The humans were making a mistake. But the humans did not hesitate. Without warning, their lead battleship, Havoc, fired its railguns. The slugs, moving at incredible speed, slammed into the closest Salcor destroyer. The impact was devastating. Shields flickered, then failed. The kinetic force shattered the enemy vessel's armor, tearing through its hull and sending debris spiraling into space. In seconds, the first Salcor ship was reduced to burning wreckage. The Tarvaxi watching from the planet gasped in shock. They had seen other species fight the Salcor before, but never like this. Most empires relied on energy weapons, slow-moving beams of light that could be absorbed by shields. The humans, however, used pure destruction. Their weapons didn't just damage, they obliterated. The Salcor retaliated. Beams of plasma and streams of high-energy torpedoes shot toward the Earth fleet. The Havoc twisted in space, moving with an agility that no one expected from a warship of its size. The other human vessels followed, evading attacks while returning fire with brutal precision. Explosions lit up the void as more Salcor ships fell, their arrogant assumptions shattered by the ferocity of human warfare. But the Salcor were not without strategy. They pulled back, regrouping their forces. More enemy warships arrived, reinforcements ready to turn the tide. The humans, though powerful, were still outnumbered. Valen felt his hope flicker. The humans had given them a chance, but now it seemed the battle was shifting again. Then the human fleet did something unexpected. Instead of holding their defensive position, they advanced. Their ships moved aggressively, closing the distance between them and the enemy. This was not the strategy of a species afraid of losing. This was the strategy of warriors who had come to win. On the bridge of the Havoc, Admiral Kane studied the battle with cold focus. "They think we're weak," he muttered. "Let's show them what humans do in a fight." Orders were given. The Earth fleet split into two formations. One group engaged the Salcor head-on, drawing their fire, while the other executed a flanking maneuver. The Salcor ships, accustomed to fighting predictable enemies, failed to react in time. Human warships moved in from the sides, launching devastating salvos into exposed enemy positions. One of the Salcor cruisers attempted to turn, but before it could escape, a human destroyer rammed into it at full speed. The collision tore through the alien hull, sending shockwaves through both vessels. The human ship, though heavily damaged, continued fighting, its weapons still firing even as its structure cracked. The crew did not abandon their post. They fought until the very last moment. Valen watched in awe. He had never seen such commitment in battle. The humans did not retreat. They did not surrender. They fought like every battle was their last, like losing was never an option. It was terrifying. It was inspiring. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, human ground forces had arrived. Dropships descended through the sky, deploying heavily armed soldiers in advanced exosuits. The Tarvaxi civilians, weak and fragile compared to their human allies, stared in astonishment as the troops moved with unshakable discipline. They set up defensive positions, their weapons scanning the skies for incoming threats. A young Tarvaxi child, trembling with fear, clung to his mother. A human soldier knelt beside him, removing his helmet to reveal a scared but kind face. "You're safe now," the soldier said. The child did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Above, the battle raged on. The Taxal Core fleet, now realizing the true threat humanity posed, unleashed their final trump card. A dreadnought. It was massive, nearly the size of a small moon, covered in weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single strike. Admiral Kane narrowed his eyes. "They'd brought a big gun," he said. "Let's show them why size doesn't matter." The Havoc and its remaining ships changed formation. The dreadnought fired its main weapon, a devastating energy cannon that tore through space itself. One human cruiser was caught in the blast, vanishing instantly. The loss was heavy, but the fleet didn't waver. They pushed forward, targeting the dreadnought's weak points. Fighter squadrons weaved through the chaos, dodging enemy fire as they launched precise attacks on the dreadnought's defenses. Human warships coordinated their firepower, striking at critical systems. The dreadnought, built for brute force, was not designed to handle such precise, tactical strikes. Finally, after relentless assault, the dreadnought's core was hit. A massive explosion erupted from within. The behemoth shuddered, its structure failing. In its final moments, the Sal Corps commander sent a desperate transmission. "What are you?" Admiral Kane responded simply, "Human." The dreadnought detonated in a violent burst of fire and metal, its remains scattering into the darkness of space. The Sal Corps fleet, seeing their strongest warship fall, hesitated. Fear crept into them for the first time. The humans, sensing weakness, pressed their advantage. One by one, the remaining Sal Corps ships fell. Some tried to retreat, but the humans hunted them down. They left no room for mercy. The message was clear: attack the weak, and you will face the strong. On the planet, the Tarvaxi civilians erupted into cheers. They had been saved, not by the great empires of the galaxy, but by a species no one had believed in. As the remaining Sal Corps forces fled, Valen looked up at the sky, watching the human fleet hover like guardians above their world. He whispered in awe, "What kind of people are they?" A nearby human soldier smiled, checking his weapon. "The kind that doesn't leave friends behind." The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The Earth fleet sent a message across the stars. "Hold on. We're here." Those words echoed in the battered command center of the Tarvaxi colony, a beacon of hope where none had existed before. For endless cycles, their distress signals had gone unanswered, ignored by the great empires of the galaxy. The Sal Corps, ruthless conquerors, had arrived to wipe them out, and there had been no one to stop them. Until now, the humans had come. No one had expected them, and few believed they could make a difference. But as their fleet emerged from the void, their weapons charged and their ships moving with disciplined precision, the entire balance of power shifted. The Sal Corps watched with mild amusement at first, analyzing the newcomers with their cold, calculating minds. These humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, untested in true warfare against superior foes. Surely, they would flee the moment true resistance met them. But then, before the Sal Corps could even open communication, the human battleship Havoc fired. Kinetic slugs, moving at incomprehensible speeds, smashed into the nearest Sal Corps destroyer, tearing through its shields and punching holes through its hull like paper. Explosions erupted across the enemy vessel, and within seconds, it was nothing more than drifting wreckage. Shock rippled through the Sal Corps fleet. No species fought like this. Most relied on energy weapons, slow beams of light absorbed by shields. The humans, however, used brute force, pure destruction, weapons designed not to disable, but to obliterate. And they were just getting started. The Sal Corps retaliated immediately, firing plasma beams, and torpedoes toward the Earth fleet, but the humans were prepared. Their ships moved with a precision that defied logic, dodging incoming fire with surprising agility for vessels of their size. The Havoc twisted, its thrusters burning bright as it narrowly avoided an energy blast meant to tear through its hull. At the same time, the human fleet coordinated their attacks with ruthless efficiency. They did not fire blindly. They targeted weak points, striking engines, weapon systems, and command centers with pinpoint accuracy. More Xalcor ships exploded, their captains realizing, far too late, that they had underestimated their enemy. But the Xalcor were not so easily defeated. They pulled back momentarily, regrouping their forces. More warships arrived, reinforcements ready to turn the tide. The humans, though powerful, were still outnumbered. The Tarvaxi colony leader, Valen, felt his hope flicker. The humans had given them a chance, but now it seemed the battle was shifting again. But then, to his shock, the human fleet did not hold their position. They advanced. Most species, when outnumbered, fought defensively, trying to hold their ground. Not the humans. They moved forward aggressively, charging straight into the heart of the Xalcor formation. This was not desperation. This was strategy. On the bridge of the Havoc, Admiral Kane watched the battlefield with unshakable focus. "They think we'll break," he said. "Let's show them what happens when you push a human too far." Orders were given, and the fleet split into two formations. One group engaged the Xalcor head-on, drawing their fire, while the other executed a rapid flanking maneuver. The Xalcor, used to fighting predictable enemies, reacted too slowly. The humans struck from multiple angles, overwhelming their defenses. One human destroyer, severely damaged but still operational, made a bold move, ramming directly into an enemy cruiser. The impact sent shockwaves through both ships, but while the Xalcor vessel crumpled under the force, the human ship kept firing until the last moment. Valen watched in awe. He had never seen a species fight like this. The humans did not retreat. They did not hesitate. They fought as if losing was not an option, as if surrender was unthinkable. Meanwhile, on the planet, human ground forces arrived. Dropships descended through the atmosphere, deploying heavily armed soldiers in advanced exosuits. The Tarvaxi, frail compared to these armored warriors, could only watch as the humans set up defensive positions with practiced efficiency. A young Tarvaxi child, trembling in fear, clung to his mother. A human soldier knelt beside him, removing his helmet to reveal a scared but kind face. "You're safe now," the soldier said. The child did not understand the words, but he understood the warmth in the voice. Above, the battle reached its peak. The Xalcor, realizing they were losing, deployed their deadliest weapon, a dreadnought, nearly the size of a small moon, bristling with firepower capable of wiping out entire planets. The monstrous ship arrived with a thunderous presence, its energy cannons charging to unleash devastation. Admiral Kane narrowed his eyes. "They brought a big gun," he muttered. "Let's show them why size doesn't matter." The Havoc and its remaining warships adjusted their tactics instantly. The dreadnought fired its main weapon, a massive energy blast that ripped through space. One human cruiser was caught in the attack, disappearing in an instant. But the fleet didn't waver. They pressed on, targeting the dreadnought's weak points. Fighters swarmed around it, launching precise strikes at exposed systems. Human warships coordinated their attacks with deadly efficiency, firing in synchronized waves to overwhelm its shields. The dreadnought, built for sheer brute force, was not designed to handle such relentless, intelligent warfare. Finally, a critical shot struck its core. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring across its decks. The Xalcor commander, his confidence shattered, sent a desperate message. "What are you?" Admiral Kane's response was simple: human. Then the dreadnought exploded in a brilliant burst of fire and debris, its remains scattering across the battlefield. The Xalcor fleet, seeing their greatest weapon fall, hesitated. Fear crept into them for the first time. The humans, sensing weakness, pressed their advantage. They hunted down the remaining enemy ships, showing no mercy. The message was clear: attack the weak, and you will face the strong. On the planet, the Tarvaxi erupted into cheers. They had been saved, not by the great empires of the galaxy, but by the one species no one had believed in. As the last Zalcor forces fled, Valen looked up at the sky, watching the human fleet hover above them, silent and powerful. He whispered, awed, "What kind of people are they?" A nearby human soldier, still gripping his rifle, gave a small smirk, the kind that doesn't leave friends behind. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The battlefield was silent, but only for a moment. The remains of Zalcor warships drifted in space, burning wreckage floating through the void as the human fleet adjusted its formation. The enemy had been driven back, their dreadnought destroyed, and their forces scattered. Yet the war was not over. On the surface of the Tarvaxi colony, the humans were already moving, securing the ground and preparing for what came next. Dropships continued to descend, releasing squads of heavily armed soldiers in sleek, black exosuits, their movements precise and coordinated. The Tarvaxi, weak and frail compared to these towering warriors, watched in a mixture of awe and confusion. Why had the humans come? Why had they risked their lives for a species they had never met? There was no answer, at least not yet. What was clear was that the humans fought differently. They did not just battle for victory. They fought as if survival was the only option. And now, they had taken up the burden of defending a people who had no strength left to fight. As human troops spread through the colony, scanning for threats, one squad reached the central square, where dozens of Tarvaxi civilians had gathered, still trembling from the recent assault. A human soldier, his armor scratched from battle, but his stance unwavering, stepped forward and removed his helmet, revealing a weathered face with sharp, piercing eyes. He looked at the frightened crowd and spoke, his voice calm yet firm. "We're here to help." The Tarvaxi leader, Valen, stepped forward hesitantly. "Why?" His voice carried both gratitude and disbelief. No species had ever come to their aid before. The humans had no reason to care. The soldier regarded him for a moment before answering, because no one else would. That was the only explanation he gave, and perhaps it was the only one that mattered. Above them, the sky burned red as the remnants of the Zalcor fleet retreated beyond the planet's atmosphere. But Valen's hope was fragile, and he knew better than to assume the fight was over. The Zalcor did not retreat unless they had another plan. And he was right. A pulse rang through the atmosphere, a low-frequency signal that disrupted communications for a brief moment. The humans quickly adjusted their systems, but the meaning was clear. The Zalcor were not done. In the distance, past the colony's outer defense walls, something stirred. A deep, rumbling tremor echoed through the ground, growing stronger with each second. The Tarvaxi turned toward the horizon, their expressions filled with dread. The humans followed their gaze, gripping their weapons as the earth trembled beneath them. Then they saw it. From the dense jungles beyond the city, massive mechanical walkers emerged, Zalcor war machines, each one towering over the battlefield, their thick armor glistening under the sun. They moved with eerie precision, their long, clawed legs digging into the ground as they advanced. Behind them, waves of Zalcor ground troops followed, their insectoid forms blending into the shadows, their weapons humming with lethal energy. The humans had won the space battle, but the Zalcor were determined to take the planet by force. The air grew tense. The Tarvaxi murmured in fear, stepping back as the invaders drew closer. Valen looked toward the human soldiers, expecting hesitation, maybe even fear. But what he saw instead was something entirely different: readiness. The humans did not falter. They did not retreat. They simply moved, their weapons locking onto targets, their battle formations shifting with cold efficiency. One soldier, a captain with a scar running down his cheek, tapped his helmet's communicator. Enemy armor sighted. Ground assault imminent. All units, prepare for engagement. The response from command was immediate. Understood. Reinforcements en route. The human troops spread out, taking cover behind makeshift barricades, abandoned vehicles, and reinforced structures. Snipers climbed to higher vantage points, setting up positions to counter the incoming enemy forces. The sound of weapons being primed filled the air, a mechanical symphony of war. But the Tsal Corps were relentless. The first shot came from one of the massive walkers, a burst of plasma energy that struck the colony's outer wall, sending debris flying in all directions. The ground shook, and the Tarvaxi screamed in terror. The humans, however, did not panic. "Hold the line," the captain barked, and the soldiers obeyed without hesitation. The first wave of Tsal Corps troops rushed forward, their sharp limbs glistening, their weapons firing deadly beams of light. The humans met them with firepower that was brutal and efficient. Bullets and energy rounds cut through the air, striking down the attackers before they could reach the colony's perimeter. Explosions erupted as grenades and rockets were launched, tearing through enemy ranks. But the Tsal Corps were not so easily stopped. The massive walkers pressed forward, their legs crushing the wreckage beneath them. One of them unleashed a powerful energy beam, slicing through a building where human soldiers had taken cover. The structure collapsed in a storm of dust and fire. A few soldiers were caught in the blast, their forms vanishing in the chaos. Yet the others did not waver. The humans regrouped instantly, adapting to the battle in real time. A squad of engineers rushed forward under covering fire, setting up portable railgun turrets, experimental weapons designed to pierce through the thickest of armor. The moment they were activated, they fired with devastating force. One of the walkers took a direct hit, its metallic body shuddering as the projectile tore through its core. A deafening explosion followed, and the machine crumbled, its remains crashing into the jungle. The humans did not celebrate. They simply moved to the next target. Valen could barely believe what he was witnessing. The Tarvaxi had fought battles before, but they had never seen anything like this. The humans fought as if the battlefield was their home, as if war was something they had been born into. They did not hesitate. They did not break. Even as more of their own fell, they pushed forward. A squad of human soldiers charged into the fray, taking the fight directly to the Tsal Corps. A towering warrior wielding a heavy plasma rifle roared as he cut through enemy ranks, his armor covered in scars and burns, but his resolve unshaken. Another soldier, a sniper perched on a rooftop, fired shot after shot, each one hitting its mark with deadly precision. The Tsal Corps, once confident in their overwhelming numbers, began to falter. But the battle was far from over. More walkers emerged from the jungle, their weapons glowing with destructive energy. The Tarvaxi leader turned to the humans, his voice filled with urgency. "We must retreat. We cannot win this fight." But the human captain shook his head, his expression unyielding. "We're not leaving," he said. Then, through the static of their comms, a new voice came through. "This is Admiral Kane. Reinforcements inbound. Hold the line." And just as the next wave of Tsal Corps prepared to unleash their fury upon the colony, the sky above them tore apart once more. The humans had come back, and this time they were bringing hell with them. The sky split open as new ships descended from orbit, their hulls burning bright as they tore through the atmosphere like vengeful meteors. The Tsal Corps ground forces hesitated for the first time, their insectoid minds processing the sudden shift in the battle. The humans had not only held the line, they had bought just enough time for reinforcements to arrive. The lead warship, the Ironclad, deployed its payload midair, and massive drop pods shot down like artillery shells, slamming into the battlefield with deafening impact. The ground shook as the reinforced pods burst open, revealing heavily armored human soldiers wielding advanced weaponry. Exosuits gleamed under the burning sky, their mechanical joints hissing as the soldiers inside stepped forward, each movement controlled yet filled with lethal intent. These were not just ordinary troops. These were shock troopers, humanity's answer to overwhelming odds. Without hesitation, they opened fire. Railguns sent projectiles at hypersonic speeds, tearing through Zal Korchitan as if it were paper. Energy shields flared and failed as plasma bolts from the humans' experimental rifles found their targets. The once dominant Salcor ground forces now found themselves on the defensive, their strategy unraveling as the battlefield changed against them. The towering war machines that had once advanced with unstoppable force now found themselves targeted by human anti-armor teams. Tactical squads moved with brutal efficiency, coordinating their attacks with precision. A group of soldiers set up a portable missile launcher, locking onto one of the massive walkers before launching a barrage of armor-piercing warheads. The Salcor machine staggered as multiple explosions tore through its frame, sending it crashing into the jungle in a cloud of fire and smoke. But even as the humans pressed forward, the battle was far from won. The Salcor were not mindless beasts. They were conquerors, and they would not be so easily broken. Their commanders adjusted their strategy, ordering their troops to focus fire on key human positions. Plasma cannons roared to life, unleashing devastating beams of energy that vaporized entire sections of the colony's outer defenses. One shot struck a human squad directly, turning them into nothing but ash. The Tarvaxi, watching from the relative safety of their shelters, trembled as they witnessed the brutality of war. And yet, despite the overwhelming firepower of their enemy, the humans did not falter. They did not waver. They adapted. Admiral Kane's voice rang through the comms, steady and commanding. Push forward. Do not let them regroup. Orders relayed across the battlefield instantly, and the human forces pressed the attack. A squad of flamethrower units emerged, their weapons igniting in a wave of controlled infernos. The Salcor shrieked as fire consumed them, their exoskeletons cracking under the heat. Another squad used concussive grenades, disorienting enemy forces before cutting them down with precise rifle fire. It was a brutal, methodical slaughter. The Salcor, once so sure of their victory, began to break. The battle had turned, and they knew it. One by one, their walkers fell. Their foot soldiers were cut down before they could retreat. The humans fought with a level of aggression the Salcor had never encountered before, because they were not just fighting to win. They were fighting to end the war before it could escalate further. Valen, still struggling to comprehend what he was witnessing, could only watch as the impossible unfolded before his eyes. For so long, his people had suffered under the boots of stronger empires. They had cried out for help, only to be met with silence. And now, these humans, these warriors from a distant world, had come and changed everything. They fought not for conquest, not for glory, but because it was simply who they were, a race that did not abandon those in need, a species that did not tolerate tyranny. The Salcor commanders, realizing their forces were being wiped out, made a desperate call. A distress signal pulsed through the system, calling for reinforcements. But something else happened. For the first time in their long history, their allies did not answer. The galaxy was watching, and they were seeing something they had never seen before. The humans were winning. And for the first time, the Salcor knew what fear truly was. The battlefield was no longer a place of war. It had become a graveyard. The once mighty Salcor forces lay in ruin, their towering war machines reduced to burning husks, their foot soldiers scattered, their formations shattered beyond repair. The humans had done what no other species had dared to do. They had stood against the tide of an empire that had crushed civilizations before them, and they had not only survived, they had won. The sky above was thick with the remnants of battle, debris from destroyed Salcor ships floating like silent ghosts, a reminder of the price paid for underestimating humanity. On the ground, human soldiers moved with unwavering discipline, sweeping the battlefield for survivors, securing the colony, and ensuring there were no traps left behind. The Tarvaxi, still struggling to process the impossible, watched from the shadows of ruined buildings, their bodies trembling not with fear, but with something they had forgotten long ago: hope. They had seen the cruelty of the Xalcor firsthand, had suffered under their merciless rule, and yet in mere hours, the humans had done what the greatest powers of the galaxy had refused to do. They had answered a call for help, not because they were asked, but because it was the right thing to do. Valen, the Tarvaxi leader, stepped forward, his frail limbs barely able to support him as he walked through the rubble-strewn streets. The human soldiers noticed him immediately, their weapons still raised, their eyes scanning for any lingering threats. And yet, when he looked into their faces, he did not see the cold, detached warriors he had expected. He saw men and women who carried the weight of what they had done, who understood the cost of war, but had never hesitated to pay it. One of the human officers, a man with a deep scar running down his jaw, approached him. His armor was dented, his face smeared with dirt and blood, but his expression was calm, almost gentle. "Your people are safe," he said, his voice steady but tired. Valen swallowed hard. "You did not have to come." The officer exhaled, glancing at the battlefield where his fallen comrades lay. "Yes, we did." There was no arrogance in his words, no demand for gratitude, only a quiet understanding that could not be put into words. The Tarvaxi leader felt something tighten in his chest. For too long, he had believed that no species cared for those who could not defend themselves. The galaxy had taught him that the strong consumed the weak, that power was all that mattered. And yet, here stood humanity, a race that defied that simple truth, a people who threw themselves into the fire, not for conquest, not for glory, but simply because someone had to. Before he could speak again, a deep rumble echoed from the horizon. The human soldiers reacted instantly, raising their weapons, their instincts sharpened by war. The battle was over, but the war was not. The Xalcor had called for reinforcements, and though no immediate response had come, they were a relentless enemy. They would return, with greater numbers, with deadlier weapons, with vengeance in their cold, calculating hearts. The humans knew it, and yet they did not retreat. Instead, Admiral Kane's voice came through their communicators, his tone firm but resolute. "We hold this ground. We send a message." Orders were given, and the human fleet above shifted into defensive positions, their weapons primed for another fight. The soldiers on the ground reinforced their positions, setting up heavy artillery and shield generators, preparing for the inevitable counterattack. The galaxy was watching now. The Xalcor had ruled through fear, but today, humanity had done something more powerful than destroy an enemy. They had given others the courage to fight back. And so, the humans stood their ground, unwavering, unyielding, unbreakable. They had arrived as strangers, but they had become something more. They had become a force that would not be ignored. The war was just beginning, but one thing was now certain. Humanity was here to stay. The silence that followed the battle was thick with unspoken tension. Smoke curled into the sky, the scent of burning metal, and scorched earth lingering in the air as the humans secured what remained of the battlefield. The Tarvaxi colony, once a place of fear and suffering, now stood under the protection of an army unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. But even in victory, the humans did not celebrate. They moved with purpose, reinforcing defenses, tending to the wounded, and preparing for what they all knew was coming next. The Xalcor would not forget this humiliation. Their empire had thrived on terror for centuries, and the idea that a species, one they had considered insignificant, had defied them was something they would never allow to stand. Every human soldier knew it. They had not just won a battle. They had ignited a war that would shake the very foundation of the galaxy. But if the Xalcor believed humanity would back down, they had made a fatal mistake. High above the colony, the fleet remained in formation, their weapons hot, their shields strong. Warships hovered like silent guardians, their crews watching the scanners for any sign of an incoming counterattack. On the ground, Admiral Kane stood with his officers near a makeshift command center, his expression unreadable as he studied the reports coming in. Losses had been heavy, but the mission had been a success. Humanity had proven itself, not just to the Tarvaxi, but to the countless other species who had long lived under the shadow of the Exal core. And the galaxy had noticed. Across the stars, transmissions spread like wildfire. News of the battle, of humanity's intervention, reached distant worlds where oppressed civilizations watched in stunned disbelief. For so long, the galaxy had assumed that the strong would always dominate the weak, that there was no force willing to stand against the might of empires like the Exal core. But today, that belief had been shattered. Across planets ruled by fear, whispers began to grow into something more. Hope. For the first time, species that had long suffered in silence began to wonder if the impossible had finally happened, if someone had come not as conquerors, but as protectors. The humans had no grand speeches, no declarations of superiority. They had simply arrived, fought, and won, and that was enough to shake the entire balance of power. Valen, the Tarvaxi leader, stood among his people, watching as the humans continued their work. His mind still struggled to process everything. His entire life, he had believed that the galaxy did not care about the weak, that the Tarvaxi would either submit or be destroyed. And yet here they stood, alive, saved by a species that owed them nothing. Slowly, he approached the human officer he had spoken to before, the scared soldier who had led the charge. The man looked at him, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "You're not leaving, are you?" Valen asked, though he already knew the answer. The officer shook his head. "Not until the job is done." "And what is the job?" The human exhaled, glancing at the horizon where the remnants of the Exal core attack force still burned. "Making sure they never do this again." It was not a promise of conquest. It was not a threat of revenge. It was a simple statement of fact. The Exal core had ruled through fear, but fear only worked when no one fought back. And now, humanity had drawn a line in the sand. They had made it clear that they were not just another species looking to survive. They were something else entirely. A force that did not seek war, but would never turn away from it if the innocent were threatened. A species that did not conquer, but refused to let tyranny stand. The Exal core had believed themselves untouchable. They had believed that no one would ever come for those they crushed under their rule. But today the humans had come. And now, the galaxy would never be the same. The stars above the Tarvaxi colony burned with the distant glow of war, even as the Exal core retreating forces vanished beyond the system's edge. Everyone knew the battle was far from over. Humanity had not just defended a single world. They had shattered an illusion that had held the galaxy in chains for centuries. The Exal core had ruled through dominance, through the certainty that no one would dare to challenge them. But now, that certainty was gone. The Tarvaxi survivors could feel the weight of history shifting around them, an invisible force pressing against their chests as they watched the human soldiers move with the same quiet efficiency as before, not celebrating, not boasting, just preparing for the next battle. Because they knew it was coming. Everyone did. The Exal core were many things, but they were not fools. They would not let this stand. And yet, as the hours passed, something unexpected began to happen. Transmissions flooded in, not from the enemy, but from distant worlds, worlds that had long suffered under the same oppression the Tarvaxi had endured. At first, it was only a few scattered signals, faint voices speaking in hushed tones, asking the same question. Is it true? Had someone truly stood against the Exal core and lived? Had a species, unknown and unexpected, come from the void and done what no one else dared? The answer spread like wildfire, carried across secret networks, whispered between the desperate and the downtrodden. Yes, it was true. Humanity had come, and they had won. The galaxy was waking up. Valem stood at the edge of the ruined colony, his tired eyes watching as human engineers set up defensive lines, reinforcing structures, deploying automated turrets, preparing for what was next. He had spent his entire life believing that survival meant submission, that to resist was to invite annihilation. And yet these humans, these impossible warriors, had rewritten everything in a single day. They did not fight because they wanted to rule. They did not stay because they sought tribute. They fought simply because someone had to, because no one else would. A group of human officers stood near the makeshift command center, their voices low but determined. Admiral Kane, his uniform still smudged with the dust of battle, studied the newest reports coming in. "We've intercepted SAL core transmissions," one of the intelligence officers said. "Their fleet is regrouping. But there's more." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Go on." The officer hesitated, as if struggling to believe his own words. "Multiple other species are reaching out to us. Not just distress signals. Some of them, they're offering to fight." A silence settled over the room. Humanity had not come to start a war, but war had come to them. And now, the enslaved, the oppressed, the forgotten, they were looking to the humans for something they had never had before, a reason to believe. Kane leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "Send a message." His officers looked at him expectantly. To who? Kane's lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. To everyone. The humans had arrived as an unknown force, stepping into a galaxy that had long been ruled by fear. But now fear had a new enemy. And for the first time, the SAL core were the ones who had to wonder. How many others would stand up now that they knew they weren't alone? How many species had been waiting for a sign that the impossible was possible? The humans had drawn a line, not just in battle, but in the hearts of those who had given up hope. The war was no longer just between humanity and the SAL core. The galaxy itself was about to change, and this time, the humans would not be fighting alone. The message spread across the stars like a wildfire, carried through encrypted channels, whispered in darkened rooms, and broadcast in places where it was never meant to be heard. The galaxy, long accustomed to silence in the face of tyranny, now had something it had never truly known before, a rallying cry. The humans had not just fought. They had not just won. They had stood where others had fallen and refused to kneel. And for the first time, the SAL core were no longer the only ones with power. As Admiral Kane's transmission echoed across systems, simple, clear, and defiant, the first responses began arriving. Some were cautious, hesitant, filled with years of learned helplessness. But others were ready. From the ruins of forgotten worlds, hidden fleets powered up engines that had been cold for centuries. Weapons, long buried under the weight of oppression, were unearthed. Warriors who had once surrendered to hopelessness now looked to the stars and saw something new. A chance, a fight worth waging. The first true war against the SAL core was no longer a distant dream. It had begun, and humanity was at its center. On the ground, the Tarvaxi watched in awe as their world changed around them. Once prisoners in their own homes, they now stood among human soldiers who treated them not as weaklings, not as burdens, but as equals in the struggle to reclaim their own freedom. Valen, who had spent his life believing no one would ever come for his people, now stood at the heart of something greater than himself. He saw Tarvaxi taking up weapons for the first time, standing alongside their human allies, learning what it meant to fight not just for survival, but for a future they had never dared to imagine. Above, the human fleet remained vigilant. The SAL core had not responded yet, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. They would come back, in greater numbers, with fury in their hearts and vengeance in their minds. But they would no longer be facing a helpless colony. They would no longer be attacking a species they believed too weak to resist. This time, when they returned, they would find a battlefield waiting for them, filled not just with humans, but with those they had spent centuries crushing beneath their rule. The galaxy was waking up, and humanity was no longer just another species in the void. They were a spark that had ignited something unstoppable. The Salcor had built their empire on fear, but now, for the first time, they were the ones who had to wonder. How many more would rise? How many more had been waiting for someone, anyone, to make the first move? The humans had made that move. And now, the war for the future of the galaxy had truly begun.